Hello everyone. This is a video which is the continuation of Unit 3, which is Ancient Architecture in India. We discussed about the architectural wonders in India, and we also started off with the first paragraph in the lesson where we spoke about the Mauryan and the Ashoka empires, and we also spoke about Megasthenes and Cellulus Nicator, right? And then now we're going to continue the next paragraph on page number 30, right? If you have your textbooks, turn with me to the next paragraph of the third paragraph, okay, of ancient architecture in India. To start with, the stupas of Sanchi. Now, what is a stupa? You have a meaning, given there. The stupa, what is a stupa? The stupa is nothing but a Buddhist shrine or a Buddhist temple. Stupas are Buddhist temples where Lord Buddha is worshipped. So, the stupas of Sanchi. Sanchi is a place which is in Madhya Pradesh, right? So, the stupas of Sanchi and Sarnath are symbols of the achievement of Mauryan architecture. In case you want to give examples, okay, of Mauryan architecture, you can show the stupa, that is the Buddhist temples of Sanchi and Sarnath. That is an example of Mauryan architecture, right? And then the gateways of the Sanchi stupa with the beautiful sculptures depicting scenes from the Jataka stories bear testimony to the skill and aesthetic sense of artisans. Aesthetic is beautiful, right? When you look at the stupas, the temples of Sanchi and Sarnath, they depict Jataka stories. Now, what are Jataka stories? Jataka stories are nothing but the different, birth of Lord Buddha before he actually took, the form of Buddha. Before he took the form of Lord Buddha, what were his previous births? In the previous births, it is believed by the Buddhists that he was an incarnation of different animals and different human beings. He took several births before he actually became Lord Buddha. And the previous births of Lord Buddha are depicted in the Jataka stories. And all these previous previous incarnations of Lord Buddha are sculptured on the temples of Sanchi and Sarnath. Okay, I hope I made myself clear. So this Jataka stories are nothing but the incarnations of Lord Buddha in his previous births. And what kind of forms did he take? He took forms of animals and human beings. Alright? Okay. Now the next line. The blending of Greek and Indian art subsequently led to the development of Gandhara art. Now, what is Gandhara art is a question that is posed from this lesson. In your short type questions or in your mid-exam, you are asked what is Gandhara art. Let's read it again. What is Gandhara art? Gandhara art is a blend. Blend means a mix, a combination of Greek and Indian art. Now, if you look at Chandragupta Maurya's architecture, it was a blend of Persian and Greek art, right? But here, Gandhara art is a blend, is a mixture of Greek and Indian art. So Indian art was there, but then it was a mixed architecture where they also inculcated Greek architecture into it. So Greek plus Indian art gave birth to Gandhara art. So you should remember this, fine? And then the other schools of art and architecture were the indigenous Mathura school and Amravati school. Now, what is the meaning of indigenous? Indigenous is something which is self-made, which is local, which belongs to our country, right? So, here Gandhara art was a combination of Greek and Indian art. But when it comes to Mathura and Amravati, you must have heard them, right? They are also places, Amravati and Mathura. Amravati is very popular now because it is in Andhra Pradesh and it is the capital of Andhra Pradesh now. So Mathura and Amravati were schools which were constructed, totally on Indian art. It was local, it was self-made. We did not copy some other foreign countries in this particular art. So Amravati and Mathura are totally our own architecture. Fine? And then a large number of statues of the Buddha were built by the artisans of these schools. Now, who are artisans? Artisans are skilled laborers who are talented, who are skilled, they have a good talent in them. So, who built them? A large number of statues of the Buddha were built by the artisans of these schools. Now, these Amravati and Mathura were schools of art where, students were taught to design, to sculpt, statues and different designs out of stone. So they were taught that. So most of the Buddha statues were built by students who studied in these schools of, Mathura and Amravati. And then of these schools, especially after the 1st century AD, under the influence of the Kushanas. So when the Kushanas were ruling, that was the time when the students of Mathura and Amravati came up with designed statues of the Lord Buddha, right? Under the Gandhara school of art. Now what is Gandhara art? It is a mixture or a blend of Greek and Indian art. So under the Gandhara school of art, lifelike structures of Buddha and Bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are the followers of Buddha. People who believe in Lord Buddha are called Bodhisattvas. Like, people who believe in Jesus Christ are called Christians. In the same way, people who follow Buddha and believe in him are called Bodhisattvas. Now, what happened to Buddha and Bodhisattvas here were made in the likeness of Greek gods, even though the ideas, inspirations and subjects were all Indian. Now, Gandhara art was a combination of Greek and Indian art. So, Gandhara was another school of art. Mathura and Amravati were another school of art. So, students who came from Mathura and Amravati, what did they do? They built statues of Buddha. Now, students who studied in the Gandhara school of art, what did they do? They made lifelike statues, which means when you looked at them, they looked like they were alive. The statues looked so realistic. Like, Madame Tussauds. Have you heard of Madame Tussauds? We have so many, statues of our celebrities there. Madame Tussauds. They have their idols there. They look so lifelike and real statues, So like that, students who came out of Gandhara art, they came up with statues of Buddha he was alive. He looked very real and original. In the same manner, Bodhisattvas, his followers were also, made like statues which looked very real. And how real did they look? They were made in the likeness of Greek gods. I told you, right? Greek gods are considered to be the most handsome. Yeah, Greek god is, one of the symbols of love too. Love. Valentine's Day, you find a lot of, all this coming up. So the, Cupid, when Cupid is the king of love, in Greek. He's considered the Greek god of love. So they looked as handsome and as beautiful as the Greek gods. They made them look so handsome. And then even though the ideas and inspirations and subjects were all Indian, even the ideas and the inspiration that they got from were all from India, they resembled Greek gods. Here the example of Greek gods is given just to show you how beautifully they were designed, how beautifully they were made. Alright? And then rich ornaments, costumes and drapery were used to impart physical beauty. They sculptured it so beautifully, and to make them look even more genuine and real, they draped it with clothes and jewelry and making it look even more real. When you looked at them, it looked very real, lifelike statues. Alright? And then the sculptures were in stone, terracotta. Terracotta is, cement-like material. Terracotta. Cement-like material and clay, right? So these were used to make these sculptures, which looked like Greek gods, and to make them look even more real, they, draped them with clothes and finery and, jewelry and stuff like that, right? So this was done by the students of the Gandhara art. Now, coming to the next paragraph. The figures of the Mathura school were made of spotted red stone. Now, students who studied in the Mathura school, they came up with figures. They also sculptured figures, but it was red spotted stone. Earlier the flooring of our houses had the cheetah stone, the small white black dots on a cream colored stone. So the same manner, this stone had red, spots on it. So they made statues from, red spotted stone. And then they had a distinct spiritual look about them. When you looked at the statues of Buddha and Bodhisattvas, which were the statues of Buddha which were made by the school students of Mathura and Amravati, they looked very spiritual. They looked very holy. That holiness was added to the sculptures that they had carved out. And then here, along with the Buddha, we also find sculptures of Jaina deities. Jaina deities are the Mahavir. You know, the Mahavir is worshipped by the Jain community. So the statues of the Mahavir, the statues of the Buddha were carved from stone, and that was the stone that was used was red spotted stone, and this was done by the students of the Mathura and Amravati schools. Okay, and then the next line, next paragraph. The Amravati school developed under the patronage of the Satavahanas of the Andhra region. So when did the Amravati school actually come into existence, and when was developed? During the reign of Satavahanas. When the Satavahanas were ruling the Andhra region, the school of Amravati was given a lot of importance, and that's why you still find Amravati in Andhra region, which is the capital of Andhra now. Right? So the Satavahanas actually encouraged and motivated the development of Amravati. A great stupa was built at Amravati in the lower Godavari region. The walls of the stupa were adorned with bas relief. Bas relief is nothing. Now take down the meaning of bas relief. It is shapes which are cut from surrounding stones. Bas relief is shapes which are cut from stones which are around it. Okay, bas relief. Now here, I'll repeat this. The walls of the stupa. Now what did I say stupas are? Stupas are nothing but Buddhist temples. So how were these walls of the Buddhist temple built? They were adorned with bas relief. Surrounding stones were carved, and these were actually visible on the walls of the stupas in the Andhra region. Okay. These had a carved medallion. Medallion is nothing but jewelry which is shaped like a medal. Okay, it looked like a medal. I am wearing one of it, right? Medal. And decorative panels. So these were carved from stone, and they were also decorated with metal like jewelry, and also decorative panels. A lot of decoration happened on these walls. And then Nagarjuna Konda is another place that is famous for its Buddhist architecture. Right? Nagarjuna Sagar, you must have visited Nagarjuna Sagar. There is a Buddhist museum there, because all these Buddhist statues and different arts of Buddhist people are actually preserved in that museum there. Now do you know the reason behind Amaravati becoming the capital of Andhra Pradesh? Because that was the place where Buddhist architecture actually came into existence. Alright, and then now going to the next paragraph. The Gupta period marks the beginning of the construction of freestanding Hindu temples. Now freestanding Hindu temples are nothing but they are carved out of rock. They are carved out of rock. So they are considered freestanding temples. They are called freestanding because they are considered out. They are designed out of rocks. And then the temple at Diogar, Jhansi district, which has a central shrine or Garbhagriha, where the image of the deity is placed, and another temple at Bithargaon, Kanpur district, are two fine examples of this period. So the Gupta period is very popular for the Garbhagriha. Garbhagriha is something that you know, right? Garbhagudi, you call it Garbhagudi in Telugu. That is the center of the temple, where you usually have the dome, and in the center of the temple is where the idol is installed. So the Garbhagriha actually came into existence from the Gupta dynasty. From that time, in somewhere around 200s and 300 BC, the Garbhagriha actually came into existence. So they were remarkable. The Buddha, the Mauryan dynasty was remarkable for the Garbhagriha that they had actually inculcated in their temples. They were the first ones to have the Garbhagriha, right? And then cave architecture is the next point. Now what is cave architecture? The word itself is telling you what it is. Cave is architecture which is designed in caves. Okay, architecture in caves. That is what we are going to learn now. The development of cave architecture is another unique feature and marks an important phase in the history of Indian architecture. Now, Indian architecture is remarkable, no doubt. There are so many architectural wonders which we have already spoken about. And among all those wonders, cave architecture is also one. Okay, cave architecture was given a lot of importance and was given a lot of prominence, and it was developed during the reign of different kings. Now, more than 1,000 caves have been excavated where archaeologists have discovered sculptures that were created in the 2nd century BC and AD 10th century. So here there was so much of architecture in India, and cave architecture was also a part of it. Now this was some thousands and thousands of years ago, and these caves, which had a lot of architectural designs on it, were submerged under the earth. And the Department of Archaeology, what is their job? They have to excavate. They have to excavate. So much of architecture in India was actually excavated. We never knew that they existed until they excavated. Excavated is nothing but they dug. They dug the earth and found, sometimes they found, villages submerged under the earth. So cave architecture was also submerged under the earth, which had to be brought to the surface by the Indian archaeologists. So cave architecture was excavated and it was brought to the surface, and that was the time when we marveled at the architecture. We never knew that Indian architecture was so beautiful, was so decorative, was so creative until it was excavated. Okay, and then the next line. And when was this excavated? In the 2nd century BC. And when was this created? It was created in the 2nd century. Just imagine, 2nd century BC and 10th century AD. During this range, during this reign, it was submerged. Some thousands of years ago, it was submerged, and they were brought to light. They were brought to surface by the archaeologists. And then, famous among these were the Ajanta-Ellora caves of Maharashtra. We just spoke about Ellora caves in the previous video, isn't it? Now the caves of Ajanta and Ellora, how many did I say they were? They were 100 in number. 100 caves of Ajanta and Ellora were submerged under the earth, and this was excavated. It was excavated by the archaeologists of India, and they came to the surface. And when you saw, it was so beautiful. It is a famous tourist spot which I just spoke to you. People visit Ajanta and Ellora caves to enjoy the beauty of the sculpting, the sculptures there. So they were excavated. The 100 caves were excavated by the archaeologists. These caves hold Buddhist viharas. Now what are viharas? Viharas are shelters. When people in the olden times, when they were traveling and they had to take rest during the nights, or maybe during the time they had to relax, they used to use these as shelters. The Ajanta and Ellora caves, they not only had temples, they also had viharas, which are shelters for viharas. Viharas are people who travel. Vihara means, vihari means traveler. So people who traveled from one place to another actually took shelter in these viharas. They were specially created for travelers. Okay, and then Chaityas. Chaityas are places of worship. So these caves had viharas and they also had chaityas, which are places of worship, as well as mandapas. Mandapas, you all know what a mandapam is, isn't it? Mandapas are, where pujas are done, where, different ceremonies are performed. Even marriages are done under a mandapa. Mandapa is those 4 pillars, yeah, the 4 pillars which has a border, and they also had such mandapas, in case they want to do some yagnas and some pujas, the mandapas were used. So the caves had viharas, they had chaityas, and they also had mandapas. And pillared temples. Not just this, they also had temples which are a lot of pillars. And just imagine, all these were submerged. All this beauty was submerged under the earth until it was excavated by our archaeologists, right? So all this beauty was brought to the surface. And the pillar temples of Hindu gods and goddesses. So what were the temples? They had Hindu gods and goddesses. They had Hindu deities in these temples. So these carves were a beauty in itself. They were architectural marvels. They had all these in the caves. In the caves they had the viharas, the chaityas, the mandapas, and also the pillared temples. So this is about cave architecture in our country. Now let's go to the next one. The next is rock cut temples. The title itself is telling you what are these temples. These temples are cut from rock. So they are called rock cut temples. Now here, temples were hewn out of huge rocks. Hewn is they were broken, right? They were designed, a nail and a hammer where you break the stone. You must have seen people doing it, right? They break stones, right? So the rock cut temples were hewn, they were broken, they were designed, alright? They were designed or they were cut out of huge rocks, huge rocks. When you look at the rock, it's just a rock. But people who are talented artisans, who are skillful, they brought out lifelike figures from the rock. Yeah, so this was what was done in our country. And then the earliest rock cut temples were built in the Western Deccan. So the first rock cut temple, were actually established or built in the Western Deccan in the early years of the Christian era. Okay, during the Christian era, that was the time when the rock cut temples were actually designed or built. The Chaitya, what did I say was the Chaitya? Chaityas are places of worship. The Chaityas at the Karli caves with fine high halls and polished decorative wall is a remarkable example of rock cut architecture. Excuse me. Now, what is an example of rock cut temples, rock cut architecture? It is the Karli caves. Now, why is it remarkable? Because they are polished and very decorative, and they are beautifully designed. So they are examples of rock cut architecture. As I said, rock cut architecture means rock cut designing. It was designed out of a rock. Karli caves were designed from rocks, and that makes it a remarkable example, okay, of a Chaitya, right? Places of worship. And then the Kailash temple at Ellora, built by the Rashtrakutas, and the Ratha temples of Mahabalipuram, built by the Pallavas, are other examples of rock cut temples. So rock cut temples have so many examples which were built by the Rashtrakutas, and where were they built? In Ellora. So what are the examples here? The Kailash temple at Ellora, the Ratha temples at Mahabalipuram, they are both examples of rock cut temples, right? And then the next line. In all probability, the stability and permanence of rocks attracted the patrons of art and builders. Now, why were people attracted to rock? Cutting rock is a very difficult task. It's hard labor. You have to, take that, the dust comes out of the rocks when you're, cutting the rocks, when you're trying to shape it. It is hard labor. It's very difficult. But, people were attracted towards rock. Why were they attracted towards rock? Because it is mentioned here, because of its permanence. Rocks are hard and strong, not easily destroyed, isn't it? Come flood, come tsunami, come anything, the rock cut temples will stand firm. They are permanent, they are very stable, isn't it? This quality of the rock actually attracted many people towards rock and cutting of rock and building temples out of rock and statues out of rock. So the main reason behind people being attracted to rock cut temples was its permanence, its stability, its strongness, its strength. So all these attracted the people to go ahead and construct rock cut temples, right? And then art and builders who decorated these temples with beautiful sculptures. Beautiful sculptures. Look at the plural form. It is not sculpture, it is sculptures. For one sculpture to be cut out of rock would have taken them ages, would have taken them days of labor, isn't it? It's not easy. Now we have machines to cut rocks as well. So easy to cut a rock, with a huge, powerful machine. At that time, it was all manual. People had to use their hands. They had to work really hard. The rock is not, delicate, isn't it? It is very strong. And that is the reason why people were attracted to it. And that strong rock had to be cut. Imagine the labor and the hard work that was put. It was not one sculpture, it was sculptures. So many designs and beautiful things were carved out of rock. And as I said, the example of rock cut temples again we have plural form, it's not one. They have huge number of temples and deities and gods and goddesses, decorative items and decorative panels. All these, were carved out of stone. They were cut out of stone to make the temple beautiful. They did not just leave a rough draft. They just did not carve the four sides of a temple, a roof, and leave it there. They decorated it. They made it even more beautiful, right? And this requires a lot of labor. And this was done by us Indians, and that is the popularity, and that is the architectural wonder of our country. So rock cut temples along with cave architecture, which we discussed today, are also under ancient Indian architecture. And now in my next video, I am going to continue with the lesson, and we are going to end the unit 3 in my next video. Thank you so much.